1978, a psychology graduate student named Robert ASHFORD conducted an experiment that would never appear in any academic journal. What happened in the basement of Thornhill University's psychology building remains one of the most disturbing incidents in the history of experimental psychology. And almost nobody knows about it. Robert ASHFORD was brilliant. His professors at Thornhill described him as unnervingly focused and obsessed with the nature of consciousness. His graduate thesis proposed a radical idea, that human consciousness could be temporarily separated from the body through sensory deprivation and psychological manipulation. The university's ethics board rejected his proposal immediately, so ASHFORD conducted the experiment anyway. In September 1978, ASHFORD recruited 12 undergraduate volunteers for what he described as a sleep study. He paid them $50 each, good money for college students in 1978. What he didn't tell them was what the study actually involved. The experiment took place in room B17, a soundproofed observation room in the basement of the psychology building. ASHFORD had modified it extensively. Every surface was painted matte black. The temperature was kept at exactly 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, body temperature. The room contained 12 hospital beds, 12 IV drips, and no windows. According to ASHFORD's notes, discovered years later, the volunteers were told they would sleep for 72 hours while their brain activity was monitored. They were each given a mild sedative and connected to what appeared to be EEG monitoring equipment. But the equipment was doing something else entirely. Pause for effect. Dr. Patricia Chen was a junior professor at Thornhill in 1978. In a 2004 interview, she described what she witnessed when she entered room B17 uninvited on the third day of ASHFORD's experiment. The door was locked, but I had a master key. I'd been suspicious of Robert for weeks. When I opened that door, I saw all 12 students lying in those beds, completely still. The lights were off except for this strange pulsing glow from the equipment, and Robert was standing in the center of the room, just watching them. But it was the students that made me scream. Their eyes were open, all of them, staring straight up at the ceiling, not blinking. I thought they were dead. They weren't dead, but according to Dr. Chen, they weren't quite alive either. When she approached the nearest student, a girl named Sarah Mitchum, and shook her shoulder, there was no response. Sarah's eyes didn't move, she didn't blink, but her heart monitor showed she was alive, breathing, heart beating normally. I started shouting at Robert, demanding to know what he'd done to them. He smiled at me. I'll never forget that smile. He said, "They're not in there anymore, Patricia. I've proven it. Consciousness isn't tied to the body. I've separated them." Dr. Chen called campus security immediately. The students were rushed to the university hospital. ASHFORD was arrested. Pause for effect. Here's where the story becomes truly disturbing. All 12 students woke up within 6 hours of being removed from room B17. Physically, they were fine. Blood tests showed only mild sedatives in their systems, nothing that would explain their catatonic state. But mentally, music shifts to more unsettling tone. They all reported the same experience. During those 72 hours, they said they had been somewhere else. Not dreaming, not unconscious, somewhere else. They described it as a vast, empty space, gray fog in all directions, no ground beneath their feet, but they weren't falling, no sky above, no sound except a distant humming like electrical wires or machinery running far away. And they weren't alone. Each student reported seeing the others in this space, all 12 of them floating in the gray void, unable to speak, unable to touch, just existing in this nowhere place. But there was something else there with them. Lower, more ominous. They called it the shape. None of them could describe it clearly. Some said it was tall. Others said it was everywhere at once. Some said it had too many limbs. Others said it had no form at all, just a presence, a weight pressing down on them. Sarah Mitchum described it in her statement to university investigators. It moved between us, looking at each of us. I couldn't see it directly, but I knew it was there, and I knew it was studying us, like we were specimens in a jar. When it looked at me, I felt it inside my head, touching my thoughts, tasting them. Pause. The university buried the incident. ASHFORD was expelled. The students were given medical leave and generous settlements in exchange for signing non-disclosure agreements, and room B17 was permanently sealed. Robert ASHFORD disappeared. No arrest record, no trial. The campus security reports from that day are missing from university archives. Dr. Chen received an anonymous phone call warning her to forget what she saw, and found her office ransacked the next day. Nothing stolen, just searched. The 12 students went on with their lives. Most of them anyway. 3 of them committed suicide within 5 years. 2 simply vanished, missing persons cases that never were solved. The remaining 7 refused to talk about the experiment. But in 2003, Sarah Mitchum broke her silence. She was dying of cancer and decided she didn't care about the NDA anymore. She gave one interview to a graduate student researching unethical psychology experiments. "We all stayed in touch," Sarah said, "the 12 of us, because we were the only ones who understood. We'd meet every few years just to check on each other, to make sure we were still us. Because sometimes we weren't sure." Pause. Let that sink in. Sarah explained that all 12 of them experienced the same phenomenon after the experiment. They would lose time, minutes, sometimes hours, where they couldn't remember what they'd done. They would find themselves in places they didn't remember traveling to, doing things they didn't remember deciding to do. It felt like being a passenger in your own body, like something else was driving. And the dreams. All 12 of them had the same recurring dream. They were back in the gray void. The shape was there, moving between them, but this time it was showing them something. A doorway, an opening in the fog. In the dream, the shape tells us that we opened something. When ASHFORD separated us from our bodies, we created a crack between here and there, between the world and somewhere else. And things can come through cracks. Music reaches peak tension. Sarah Mitchum died in January 2004. The day before she died, she called the 5 remaining survivors and told them all the same thing. "It's here, in my hospital room. I can see it in the corner, the shape from the void. It's finally come through." The nurse who found Sarah's body reported she died peacefully in her sleep, but the nurse also reported something else, something she later retracted and claimed was a hallucination from exhaustion. She said when she entered the room, the temperature had dropped to near freezing, and there was frost on the window, in the shape of a handprint, too large to be human. Pause. Robert ASHFORD was never found. His doctoral thesis was never published. Room B17 at Thornhill University was demolished during renovations in 2010. But according to students who explore the psychology building late at night, you can sometimes hear it. A low humming sound, like electrical wires or distant machinery, coming from where the basement used to be. And if you listen very carefully, you can hear voices in the humming. 12 voices, calling for help from somewhere very far away. End.
The Crying Boy. In September 1985, a firefighter named Peter Hall responded to a house fire in Rotherham, England. The house was completely destroyed, everything reduced to ash and twisted metal. Everything except one thing. a painting of a crying boy, hanging on the wall, completely untouched by the flames. Hall had seen this before. In fact, he'd seen it dozens of times. Every house fire he'd responded to in the past year had one thing in common. Somewhere in the wreckage, perfectly preserved, was a print of the same painting, a young boy with tears streaming down his face. Hall mentioned it to a reporter from the Yorkshire Sun. The reporter investigated, and what they found sparked a mass panic across the United Kingdom. Music shifts to more ominous. The painting was called The Crying Boy. It was created in the 1950s by Spanish artist Giovanni Bragolin. The image showed a young boy, maybe 5 or 6 years old, with enormous eyes brimming with tears. His expression was one of absolute despair. The painting became incredibly popular. Prints were mass-produced and sold in department stores across Europe. By the 1980s, millions of homes had a copy of The Crying Boy hanging on their walls. And then the fires started. Pause for effect. After the Yorkshire Sun article was published, firefighters across England came forward with the same story. House after house, completely destroyed by fire, and in each one, the Crying Boy print survived without a scratch. Not just survived, it was often found face down on the floor, as if it had fallen from the wall. But the frame wouldn't be burned, the glass wouldn't be cracked, the print itself would be pristine. The Sun received over 50 reports in the first month alone. Lower voice, more serious tone. But the story of the Crying Boy goes back further than 1985, much further. Giovanni Bragolin, whose real name was Bruno Amadio, painted dozens of portraits of crying children in the 1950s and 60s, but one painting became his most famous, The Boy with the Tears. Bragolin never revealed the identity of the child in the painting. He never explained why the boy was crying, and he never painted another portrait of the same child. When asked about it in a 1963 interview, Bragolin said something strange. "That boy is cursed. I captured something in him that should have stayed hidden. I will never paint him again." He died in 1981 before the fires began. Pause. In 2010, a Spanish investigator named Carlos Mendez began researching Bragolin's life. What he discovered was disturbing. Bragolin had traveled through post-war Spain in the late 1940s and early 1950s, painting portraits of orphans and street children. He would pay them a small amount to sit for him. Most of these children were homeless, survivors of the Spanish Civil War. Mendez found records of Bragolin's travels, and he found something else. In every town where Bragolin had painted children, there were reports of fires. Orphanages, churches, private homes. Between 1948 and 1955, over 40 fires occurred in locations where Bragolin had recently visited. And in several cases, the only casualty was a child who had sat for one of Bragolin's paintings. Music intensifies. Mendez tracked down surviving relatives of these children. One elderly woman, Maria Santos, remembered her brother, a boy named Alfonso who had posed for Bragolin in 1952. "The painter came to our village. He was looking for children to paint. My brother Alfonso sat for him. The man paid him 50 pesetas. Alfonso was so proud. But after the painting was finished, Alfonso changed. He became withdrawn. He stopped playing. He just sat in his room and cried for hours. My mother thought he was sick. 3 weeks later, our house caught fire in the middle of the night. Alfonso died in the fire. He was 6 years old." Pause. "The strange thing was," Maria continued, "the fire started in Alfonso's room, but the investigators said there was no source of ignition, no candles, no matches, nothing. They called it spontaneous combustion, but we knew the painting had done something to him." Maria's story matched dozens of others Mendez uncovered. Children who posed for Bragolin, children who became depressed and withdrawn afterward, children who died in fires. But here's the truly disturbing part. In 1954, Bragolin's studio in Madrid burned down. The fire destroyed everything: his canvases, his supplies, his original paintings. Everything except one portrait, The Crying Boy.
Firefighters found it in the center of the studio, lying face up on the floor. The frame was intact, the painting was untouched, and according to the fire inspector's report, a report that Mendez found in Madrid's archives, there was something else. In the painting, the boy had changed. The inspector's original description from when he'd seen the painting before the fire: boy crying, looking directly at viewer. The inspector's description after the fire: boy crying, looking down to the left, as if turning away. The painting had changed positions. Music becomes more unsettling. After the Yorkshire Sun article in 1985, panic spread across Britain. People who owned prints of the crying boy became terrified. They tried to throw them away, but garbage collectors refused to take them. They tried to burn them, but many reported the paintings wouldn't catch fire. The Sun organized a mass burning of the crying boy prints on Halloween 1985. Over 2,500 prints were collected and burned in a giant bonfire. According to witnesses, the paintings burned, finally. But several people who attended the burning reported the same strange experience. As the flames consumed the prints, they heard something. Children crying. Hundreds of children, their voices rising from the fire. Pause. The panic faded. The story became a curiosity, then a legend. Today, the crying boy is considered an urban legend, a mass hysteria event, coincidence and superstition, but the fires never completely stopped. More serious, investigative tone. In 2018, a house fire in Liverpool destroyed a family home. The family escaped safely, but the house was a total loss. The fire investigator, Rachel Morrison, found something in the debris, a print of the crying boy, perfectly preserved. Morrison knew the legend. She'd heard about it in training as an example of correlation without causation. She laughed it off. But she kept the print, as a curiosity. 3 months later, her own house caught fire. She wasn't home. The fire started in her bedroom with no clear source of ignition. Everything she owned was destroyed, except the crying boy print, which firefighters found face down on her bedroom floor, completely untouched. Morrison quit her job. She won't talk about what happened, but she did tell one colleague something before she left. I looked at the painting after my fire, really looked at it. The boy's eyes, they're not just sad, they're angry, and I swear to God he's looking at something behind the viewer, something we can't see. Whatever it is, I think it's what makes him cry. Music builds to crescendo. Carlos Mendez's research was never published. He stopped investigating the crying boy in 2012 and refused to discuss it further. But before he stopped, he made one final discovery. He found Broglin's personal diary from 1951. In it, Broglie wrote about the boy who became his most famous subject. The entry read, "I found him in the ruins of a bombed church outside Valencia. He was alone, sitting in the ashes, crying. He told me his name was Alfonso. He told me his parents died in a fire. He told me he was cursed, that fire followed him everywhere, that everyone he loved would burn. I didn't believe him. I thought he was traumatized. I painted him anyway. When I finished the portrait and showed it to him, he looked at it for a long time. Then he smiled. It was the saddest smile I've ever seen. He said, 'Now I can share it. Now everyone who looks at me will carry a piece of the fire, and maybe if enough people carry it, I can finally stop crying.' The boy walked away. I never saw him again, but I think about what he said, about sharing the fire. Sometimes I wonder if the painting is crying because of what happened to him, or if it's crying because of what it's going to do to everyone else." Long pause. The final line of Brogline's diary entry was this: "I asked the boy what his full name was. He said Alfonso Diablo, Devil Alfonso. I don't think Alfonso was his real name. I don't think he was entirely human." Music fades to silence. If you own a print of the crying boy, fire safety experts recommend you dispose of it, not because of the curse, but because insurance companies in the UK have documented that homes with the crying boy print are 7 times more likely to experience electrical fires than homes without it. 7 times. They can't explain why. Pause. And if you do own one, whatever you do, don't look too closely at the boy's eyes. You might see what he's looking at, and according to everyone who's seen it, you really don't want to know what stands behind you when you look at that painting.
The Smiling Family. On June 3, 2014, police in Burlington, Vermont received a wellness check request for the Hartley family. The neighbors hadn't seen them in 3 days, and there was a strange smell coming from their house. When police entered the home at 1847 Maple Drive, they found the entire family in the living room. All 4 of them, sitting on the couch, smiling. They'd been dead for 72 hours. The Hartley family seemed perfect. David Hartley, 41, was an accountant. His wife, Michelle, 39, taught elementary school. Their children, Emma, 12, and Joshua, 9, were honor students. According to neighbors, they were the ideal American family. Friendly, active in the community, always smiling. Always. Officer Sarah Mills was first on scene. In her incident report, she described what she saw. The family was arranged on the couch as if posing for a photograph. David on the left, Michelle on the right, children between them. All 4 were sitting upright, hands folded in their laps, and all 4 were smiling. Not grimacing, not a death rictus, genuinely smiling, like they were happy. It was the most disturbing thing I've ever seen. The medical examiner determined they died of carbon monoxide poisoning. A faulty furnace had filled the house with deadly gas. It should have been a tragedy, an accident. But then they found the photos. On the Hartley family's camera, a digital camera sitting on the coffee table in front of them, were 247 photographs, all taken in the 3 days before they died. The first photo was time-stamped June 1st, 7:23 a.m. It showed the family having breakfast, normal, smiling. The second photo, June 1st, 31 a.m. The family in the living room, still smiling. The third photo, June 1st, 45 a.m. The family on the couch, smiling. The photos continued every 8 to 15 minutes for 3 days. The family didn't move much between photos. They shifted positions slightly, adjusted their clothing, but mostly they just sat on the couch, smiling. The photos showed their gradual deterioration. Their skin became paler, dark circles appeared under their eyes, Emma's lips turned blue, Joshua's hands developed a tremor visible in the later images. They were dying, slowly, and they documented every moment, but they never stopped smiling. Photo 187, time-stamped June 3rd, 2:14 a.m., showed David Hartley holding a piece of paper to the camera. Written on it in shaky handwriting, "We can't stop smiling." Photo 203, June 3rd, 4:47 a.m., Michelle holding a paper. "Something is wrong with us." Photo 219, June 3rd, 6:12 a.m., Emma holding a paper, tears streaming down her face. "It hurts to smile, but we can't stop." In the photo, Emma is crying, but she's also smiling, a wide, genuine-looking smile even as tears pour down her cheeks. The final photo, number 247, was time-stamped June 3rd, 8:33 a.m., approximately 6 hours before police arrived. It's a selfie taken by David Hartley. You can see his arm extended holding the camera. The whole family is in frame, seated on the couch. All 4 of them are looking directly at the camera. All 4 of them are smiling their widest smiles yet. But if you look closely at their eyes, and police investigators did look closely, you can see something else. Terror. Pure, absolute terror. The investigation focused on the carbon monoxide, the faulty furnace, an accident, case closed, but Detective James Werner couldn't let it go. Carbon monoxide poisoning causes confusion, headaches, loss of consciousness, Werner said in a 2015 interview. It doesn't cause people to sit in the same spot for 3 days taking photographs of themselves. It doesn't cause paralysis of facial muscles into a smile position. Something else happened in that house. Werner investigated the Hartley family's background. What he found was disturbing. 3 weeks before their deaths, the Hartley family took a weekend trip to a cabin in the White Mountains. According to Michelle's journal, found in their bedroom, something happened during that trip. The final entry in the journal, dated May 15th, read, "We found something in the woods today. An old well covered with rotted boards. Joshua fell through before we could stop him. David climbed down to get him. He was only down there for maybe 3 minutes, but when he came back up with Joshua, they were both smiling. I asked if Joshua was hurt. David said no, that Joshua was fine, that they were both fine, that they'd seen something wonderful down there. But he won't tell me what it was. He just keeps smiling." I went to check on the well this morning while David and Joshua were fishing. I looked down into it. It's deep, very deep, and there's something at the bottom. I couldn't see what it was clearly, but it was moving. It looked up at me. I ran. Emma asked what I saw. I told her nothing, but now Emma won't stop asking about the well. She wants to see it, and I realized something terrible. I want to see it again, too. I want to go back down there, and I can't stop smiling about it. That was Michelle's last journal entry. The family returned home from the cabin on May 16th. According to neighbors, the family seemed even happier than usual when they got back. They couldn't stop smiling. I mean, they were always cheerful, but this was different. It seemed almost manic. David called in sick to work on May 17th. He never went back. Michelle called in sick on May 18th. Same story. The children stopped going to school on May 20th. For 2 weeks, the family stayed inside their house. Neighbors would see them through the windows, sitting together in the living room, just sitting and smiling. On June 1st, 2 days before they died, a neighbor spoke to David over the fence. I asked if everything was okay, the neighbor recalled. David turned to look at me, and his smile was so wide it looked painful. He said, "Everything is perfect. We've never been happier. We're going to be together forever now." I asked what he meant. He just kept smiling and said, "You should smile more. It feels so good. Once you really start smiling, you can't stop, and that's when you see it." I asked what he sees. He said, "The thing that makes everything better, the thing at the bottom. It showed us how to be truly happy." Lower, more disturbing. Detective Werner sent a team to investigate the cabin and the well in the White Mountains. They found the well exactly where Michelle's journal described. The rotted boards were broken through, consistent with someone falling through. Werner's team brought equipment to explore the well. It was 47 feet deep. At the bottom, they found something. Bones. Hundreds of bones. Human bones. Some old, decades, maybe centuries old, some recent. And carved into the stone wall at the bottom of the well, in dozens of different hands, spanning what appeared to be many different time periods, were the same words repeated over and over: "Smile and see. Smile and see. Smile and see." The forensic team recovered the bones and began the identification process. What they found was impossible. Some of the bones had dental records that matched missing persons cases going back to the 1940s, hikers who'd disappeared in the White Mountains, campers who'd never returned. But here's what made no sense. Many of the bones were too old for the dental work. Carbon dating suggested some bones were 300+ years old, but they had modern dental fillings, as if the people had lived recently, but their bones had aged centuries in just a few decades. One of the forensic technicians who examined the well made an unofficial report that was later suppressed, but Detective Werner shared it in his 2015 interview. The tech said that at the bottom of the well there was something else, not bones, not stone, something organic, moving, like it was breathing. When they shined their lights on it, it reacted. It moved away from the light, but before it did, they saw something. Eyes, dozens of eyes, all different sizes, all different colors, and all of them were looking up, at the team, at the surface. The tech said he felt an overwhelming urge to smile, not just to smile, but to climb down into the well, to get closer to it. He said his face started hurting because